Discovered by a struggling farmer, this amazing woman's unexpected awakening changed everything. Joe wiped the sweat from his brow as the sun pierced through the fog blanketing his family's farm. The land, sprawling and beautiful, felt more like a curse than a blessing. Ever since his father passed, the weight of keeping the farm alive pressed down on him, the shadows of the past creeping into his every thought. Memories of late nights working side by side with his father haunted him, just as warnings from the bank loomed larger, echoing with threats of foreclosure. Each day was a relentless battle against the encroaching despair that whispered he was losing everything he ever held dear. The stubborn patch of ground he was digging spoke to him of the struggles ahead, each shovel of dirt revealing echoes of his father's labor. With every swing, he felt himself grappling with an internal war, the devotion to uphold his family's legacy versus the burgeoning fear that he was utterly unfit to do so. He hesitated, pulling back for a moment and letting doubt seep into his bones. If he failed, what would that mean? Would he be the last to carry the family name, a monument to dreams denied? As Joe dug deeper, his shovel struck something hard. Curious, he knelt down to inspect, revealing a weathered journal, its leather cover cracked and well-worn. Clara. The name penned in elegant cursive instantly piqued his interest. Joe couldn't help but wonder about the life behind those pages. As he opened it, Clara's eloquent yet sorrowful reflections poured forth, each line revealing her sharp intellect and a longing for something more, dreams she'd sacrificed for caretaking, a path chosen under societal pressures and thick layers of obligation. A strange kinship grew. He too felt the sting of hopes tempered by responsibility, the weight of expectations folding around him like iron chains. Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. That night, Clara's words circled in his mind, igniting a flicker of determination. He discovered her vulnerabilities mirrored his own. Days turned into nights as they began to forge a friendship. Joe, ever grounded in the soil, and Clara, locked in an office cubicle, charting courses against the silent struggles of their lives. They joined forces. An idea to host a history fair danced between them, a chance to revive her dreams and save the farm by bringing the small town together. But every time Joe looked at her, he saw the shadow of self-doubt lurking in her eyes, the past gripping her tightly. What if she failed? What if he failed? Just when hope was sprouting between them, an unexpected event challenged their fragile connection. In the thick of it, Clara unearthed a family secret deeper than any fear, papers that could reshape everything she believed about herself. Would this revelation restore her confidence, or would it push her further into despair? As Joe stood by her side, the specter of debt loomed daily, tightening around them as each renewed hope faltered. Together, they faced daunting whispers and judgment, but the lingering question remained: could they carve a path through the weight of the past and find strength in their shared struggle? Or would the ghosts of societal expectations overshadow their dreams, leaving them both shackled to lives they never asked for? The answer hung between them, tantalizing and terrifying, a moment that could shift everything, all while the fog rolled in thick, quiet yet relentless. The next morning, Joe awoke earlier than usual. The sunlight filtered through the kitchen window, illuminating the journal on the table. He hadn't been able to set it aside after discovering its contents. Clara's words had woken something dormant in him, igniting a yearning for a life unrestrained by pressure and expectation. Although he was grounded in his role as the caretaker of the farm, he felt pushed by an urgency to pursue more than just survival. With a steaming cup of coffee in hand, he leafed through the journal once more, tracing the delicate lines of Clara's handwritten thoughts. They spoke of fear, aspiration, and ultimately, resilience, the desire to redefine herself despite the weight of everyone else's expectations. As he read, he couldn't help but reflect on his own life. His dedication to the farm, while admirable, was slowly choking the dreams he hadn't permitted himself to voice. Driving himself outside, Joe pulled on his work gloves and began surveying the land. The crops needed tending, they were at the crux of a pivotal season. As he walked through the rows, his mind was a whirlpool of ideas sparked by Clara's narrative. What if he infused this season with innovation? Could he introduce new methods or technology? Ideas leaped like the restless cornstalks in the wind, demanding his attention, but doubt crept in, gnawing at his enthusiasm. Change felt daunting, especially after years of ingrained routine. Could he convince himself to adapt, the same way Clara found resilience in the face of her fears? A deep breath fueled his determination. Perhaps change was the very key to unlocking a better future. He spent the day drafting a proposal to implement sustainable farming techniques. It was an audacious task, enveloped in both hope and trepidation. For too long now, his farming practices were rooted in an age-old routine. Each outline he scribbled down was a step away from projected failure and toward the latent possibilities barely explored. Just like Clara fought against her prescribed path, he realized he had to elbow aside the stagnation that masked his enthusiasm. Later that afternoon, he called Clara. He could sense her trepidation too, that same ghostly yearning for something more. As they discussed the details of their fare, he began to infuse conversation with his newfound ideas for the farm. Her voice sparkled through the receiver as they exchanged enthusiasm for transformation together. Then, in a moment of vulnerability, Clara revealed her family secret. The words tumbled out in a rush, accompanied by a hint of disbelief. She spoke of misplaced identities, the crushing pressure of familial expectation, and how it tied back to her career and life decisions. Her voice cracked, lacing the conversation with raw emotional power. Joe listened intently, recognizing how intertwined their struggles had become, binding them deeply in shared vulnerability and mutual support. "It's time we reclaim our paths," he stated firmly, conviction anchoring each word. A light shifted in Clara's voice as she engaged with his vision, piecing together plans that felt alive with possibility. But later that night, as fear seeped back into their conversation, they both faced the unyielding question: what if their efforts, their dreams, met an unexpected end? The banks didn't just threaten foreclosure, they posed a challenge to their very spirits, taunting them in the shadows with the reality of tangible failure. In that charged moment, a new realization crystallized for Joe. The stakes had transformed. They were no longer just fighting for survival but for identity and existence shaped by their own decisions rather than inherited duty. Would they dare to push forward, defy the voices of doubt, and grasp the futures they yearned for? The air grew thick with tension, and uncertainty hovered like a dark cloud overhead. As they hung up, Joe stood alone in the dim light of the kitchen, heart racing and mind spinning with newfound resolve. But even as hope surged within, he couldn't escape the gnawing sense that the ultimate test was yet to come, one that would challenge every belief he held about himself and his capacity to rise from the ashes of his family's legacy. The time was fast approaching when the bank's decision would arrive, and with it would come the relentless question of survival. Would Joe take the plunge into transformation, or would he collapse under the weight of expectation as generations before him had? The following morning, a cool mist settled on the farm as Joe rose with the dawn. The air was different, charged with potential. He felt as though he had been granted a new start, a second chance to carve out a destiny not defined by the burdens of his family's legacy. With Clara's words echoing in his mind, he stepped outside, taking a deep breath of the fresh, crisp air. The doubts that had haunted him yesterday still lingered, but today, they were tinged with a faint tinge of determination. As he traversed the fields, he scrutinized his surroundings with a fresh perspective. That unruly patch over there, what if it became the site for a new crop? He envisioned a community garden, vibrant and full of life, sparking an idea within him that filled him with excitement. He halted at the edge of the plot, imagining the earthy smell of freshly turned soil as he committed to transforming this barren stretch. But the vision of what could be soon collided with the reality of the toil it would demand. He could almost feel the weight of his family's expectations pressing down on him. What if his efforts were in vain? The creeping thought slipped into his mind, yet he pushed it aside with a shake of his head. That confrontation was not new, it was part of his landscape, a familiar yet unwelcome guest. Joe reminded himself that Clara had faced her fears, had bravely shared her doubts with him. If she could speak out against her familial constraints, he could confront his own. Determined, Joe began sketching out plans, using the notebook that had once belonged to Clara, unknowingly having been passed on with her empowering spirit. As he listed crop rotation schedules and renewable energy sources to power his irrigation, he discovered a thread weaving through his thoughts. This was not just about farming. This was about life, freedom, choice. Time stretched as he pored over the notebook, ideas spilling forth like the vibrant colors of a painter's palette. Clara's resilience infused him, each word a catalyst for an emerging identity distinct from the one he had inherited. This journey was no longer about mere survival but about claiming his voice amidst the din of expectations. Fueled by adrenaline, Joe made his way to the local library that afternoon, his mind buzzing with energy. He immersed himself in research, digging into innovative farming techniques, sustainability advancements, and agricultural technology. He read about urban farming initiatives, crop diversification, and soil health, feeling invigorated by the breadth of possibilities. With each page he turned, he gained confidence. He began to envision the farm not merely as a relic of his family's past but as a beacon of hope for others, an example of how dreams could be cultivated rather than erased. Yet, beneath that excitement, a nagging question loomed. What if the bank's decision came down against him, as it threatened to do? Could he truly persist in his innovative endeavors if his very foundation was under threat? The mixed emotions battled within him, fueling a conflict that felt insurmountable. Returning home later that evening, reality set in again as he looked at the looming farmhouse, a reminder of the legacy he had wrestled with for so long. He realized that the chance of failure was now as significant as that of success. The stakes were steep, but for the first time, he felt ready to embrace the journey ahead. Clara's voice echoed in his mind, urging him to continue. The tantalizing vision of his transformative dream glimmered just beyond reach, tantalizing and terrifying him in equal measure. Could he possibly achieve what generations before him had not? He finally settled down at the kitchen table and began drafting a formal proposal, pulling all the ideas together into a cohesive vision for his farm, his future. But just as he absorbed himself in the writing, an unexpected knock at the door sent his heart racing. Would this be the harbinger of the change he sought, or yet another reminder of reluctance from the past? As he stood up, a sense of both dread and excitement surged within him. Joe opened the door, his heart racing with anticipation. There stood a figure, silhouetted in the glow of the porch light, a woman whose presence seemed both familiar and painfully foreign. It was Lila, a childhood friend, her expression tense, carrying a desperate air that instantly pulled Joe into a world of unexpressed fears and unresolved frustrations. "Joe, I need your help," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. The weight of her words settled over him like a heavy blanket. Helping Lila meant negotiating the tightrope between friendship and familial obligations, a challenge he hadn't anticipated when he envisioned his future. "What has happened?" he asked, stepping aside to let her in, instinctively sensing that her troubles mirrored some of his own. As she crossed the threshold, he observed the distinct changes in her demeanor. Once filled with the carefree laughter of their youth, she now appeared weighed down by burdens most never knew she carried. Lila explained that the drought had devastated her family's land and with it, their dreams of cultivating an abundant harvest. The bank, the relentless force in their lives, had given them an ultimatum: repay the loan or lose the farm. Joe's thoughts flickered back to his own plight, and the fear that had gripped him at the prospect of a bank decision crushing his aspirations. "I don't know what to do, Joe," she admitted tearfully, her hands trembling as she ran fingers through her hair. "We could lose everything." Suddenly, Joe saw reflections of his own doubt in her eyes. Both trapped by expectations and the looming threat of the bank, their paths had diverged but had now converged once more in shared desperation. As he listened to her fears, a flicker of fire ignited within him. "I can help you," he found himself saying before he could overthink it. The newfound determination he had been nurturing surged forth, now a beacon for both of them. "We can explore new techniques. Maybe even turn some of your fields into experimental plots for new crops. You can't just lose your family home without fighting back." Her eyes widened with hope, even as her brow furrowed in uncertainty. "But what if it doesn't work? What if it does?" Joe countered, his voice steadying with each word. "We can't let fear dictate our next move. Clara taught me that. We have to take risks, to innovate. We can band together, research options, and find ways to appeal to the bank or even explore cooperative farming if it comes to that." As she considered his words, a silent exchange unfolded, a transfer of conviction as if both their vulnerabilities fortified the other. Lila's tenacity had always sparked Joe's entrepreneurial spirit. Embracing this shared struggle meant sharpening his own resolve. The night deepened around them, filled with turbulent thoughts and wavering emotions, but amidst it all, Joe felt himself blossom into a leader for the first time. The conversations that followed were electric, weaving plans for resilience into the fabric of their challenged futures. They discussed crop cycles, solar energy for irrigation, and marketing strategies that could attract new customers, each idea building on the last, spiraling into a whirlwind of creativity and potential. But even as visions of success glimmered in their minds, darker shadows loomed on the horizon. For every step forward, the threat of the bank's impending decision loomed ominously, a reminder of their roots tethered deep in doubt. Eventually, Joe glanced at the clock, reality crashing in. It was late, and fatigue clung to him like a shroud. Yet, the thrill of forming this new partnership felt invigorating. He promised Lila they would continue their efforts and arrange a meeting with her family to discuss the path ahead. As she left, the warmth of their shared commitment lingered in the cool night air, but uncertainty gnawed at him. The stakes had multiplied, and as tensions escalated, so too did the burdens he carried. When would he face the bank's decision, and would it bring the change they desperately needed or shatter the fragile hope that had begun to take root? Tomorrow loomed large on the horizon, bringing with it the potential for either transformation or despair. As he lay down to sleep, the walls of his childhood home felt suddenly claustrophobic again, heavy with expectation. One thought circled in his mind with relentless pulse: the time had come to face his own voice, to demand a future not dictated by fear but forged by the relentless pursuit of hope. What awaited him, he wondered, when the dawn broke and the world opened up once more. The morning light filtered through the curtains, casting a golden hue over Joe's room. Each ray of sun felt like an invitation, daring him to rise and confront the day ahead. Yet, even with the illumination, darkness simmered just beneath the surface of his optimism. Shadows of doubt lingered, they clawed at his confidence, trying to overshadow the fiery conviction he felt last night. Today would be different, he could feel it in his bones. He rolled out of bed, shaking off the lethargy that usually gripped him in the mornings. The mirror reflected a man layering courage beneath the remnants of uncertainty. He had to lead now, not just for himself, but for Lila and her family. Responsibility weighed heavy on him, but so did the hope they had shared. As he dressed, his thoughts circled the ideas they had exchanged. Would the bank listen? Could they implement the concepts they had brainstormed? The mere act of planning felt transformative, a sign that he was gradually stepping out of his fear-ridden shell. Joe knew he had to infuse this initiative with action, to push beyond mere dreamcasting into tangible reality. After a hurried breakfast, Joe drove towards Lila's family farm, fueled by purpose. The road felt different, less like a path of resignation and more like a corridor guiding him toward potential. It was strange how hope could recalibrate one's perception, turning ordinary spaces into avenues of possibility. Upon arriving, Lila was already waiting, her expression a blend of trepidation and hope. She glanced at him, adjusting her posture as if readying herself for the day's monumental task. "Did you really mean what you said last night?" she asked while looking away, a hint of vulnerability peeking through her bravery. Joe nodded. "Absolutely. I believe we can turn this situation around." His words seemed to resonate, and Lila's features softened slightly, but the underlying fear remained evident. "We can call Mr. Castillo at the bank, but we might need hard data to support our case," Joe continued, excitement bubbling in him as he spoke. "If we can show that we're trying something innovative, they might be more willing to work with us." Lila's eyes widened, mirroring both nervous anticipation and the flickers of hope. "What if they think we're just wasting time? What if they see us as pioneers?" Joe countered, feeling the energy pulse between them. "We have to focus on what we can control. Every minute counts." They spent the morning digging deeper into research, exploring crop options that could withstand the harsh conditions and even brainstorming ways to utilize technology to optimize irrigation. It was a whirlwind of papers and passionate discussions as they crafted a strategy. Joe's heart raced as he navigated this new territory, realizing how naturally leadership flowed from him when the stakes were high. Lila's family joined them mid-morning, carrying their own burdens yet curious about the dynamics between Joe and Lila. Joe introduced his ideas with a contagious enthusiasm, selling them not just as theories but as lifelines. The discussion grew intense, objections arose but were met with data-supported rebuttals. Joe's resolve grew stronger, each challenge rekindled not just hope but a sense of personal growth that he craved. But moments of doubt would inevitably creep in, and Joe caught himself struggling against a resurgence of his previous fears. What if this effort failed? Would it crush the fragile bond they were building? The potential of losing everything weighed heavily. With the meeting drawing to a close, a flicker of anxiety crept over him. Mr. Castillo had agreed to meet, but the anticipation felt like a tightrope walk without a net. Joe's own success was now intertwined with Lila's family fortunes. He could already feel the pressure of their collective fate resting uneasily on his shoulders. As Lila and her family moved toward the door, Joe's voice broke through the silence that lingered. He needed one last reminder of their shared purpose. Together, we can fight this. Whatever happens, let us stand strong. A determined, collective nod was all he needed to see that this partnership was solidifying into something transformative and profound. As the door closed behind them, Joe's resolve was steeped in self-reflection. This was more than just a fight for the farm, it was a testament to his evolution. He had to summon his courage like never before, knowing he now faced a formidable adversary, the bank, and the ticking clock of impending decisions. What would happen when they finally confronted the bank? The answer hung thick in the air, waiting, just out of reach. The sun dipped low in the sky, casting long shadows that mirrored the internal turmoil Joe now faced. As he sat alone in his car, parked outside the bank, he could feel the weight of expectation pressing against his chest. This place, with its austere facade, seemed to harbor the judgment of countless decisions that had shaped lives, some for the better, others for the worse. His hands gripped the steering wheel, knuckles white with tension, as a million what-ifs spiraled through his mind. What if Mr. Castillo wasn't in the mood to listen? What if the innovative ideas they had cultivated weren't enough? Each thought beat against his resolve, echoing the familiar chorus of self-doubt that had haunted him for years. But deep down, something had shifted in him. A flicker of determination had ignited, striking against the darkness of fear. He could feel it this time would be different. With a deliberate breath, he stepped out of the car, forcing his feet to move towards the entrance. As he crossed the threshold, the air inside felt heavy with a mix of formality and fate, and for a moment, he hesitated. The polished surfaces and the hum of conversations punctuated by the clicking of heels felt overwhelmingly alien. Would he truly be able to stand strong against them all? Approaching the receptionist, he introduced himself, his voice steadier than he anticipated. "I'm here to see Mr. Castillo." The receptionist nodded, motioning for him to take a seat in the waiting area, which felt more like a purgatory than a place of hope. Time stretched, every second felt like an eternity. He couldn't escape his thoughts, questioning his worthiness and the merit of his proposals. Was he really the right person to guide Lila's family? The tremor in his stomach tightened with each passing moment, but amid the swirl of anxiety, he found a pocket of clarity. Their ideas weren't just ideas, they represented lives, dreams, and the possibility of a future. When Mr. Castillo emerged, looking as formidable as a guard dog, Joe's heart raced. They exchanged pleasantries, but Joe could see the skepticism underlying the banker's smile. He took a deep breath, relying on the small reservoir of confidence he had gathered during his time with Lila and her family. "I appreciate you seeing me today, Mr. Castillo," he began, his voice firm yet respectful. "I believe we have a unique opportunity to not only save the farm but also to innovate the agricultural practices in this region." As he laid out their vision, Joe noted each nod and frown from Castillo, adjusting his tone and pacing as necessary. What had felt like gibberish a few weeks ago now flowed from his lips as if they were lyrics of a well-rehearsed song. The initial skepticism began to wane, and with each new insight he shared, Joe saw a flicker of intrigue in Castillo's eyes. Just as he transitioned to discussing actual figures and projections, Joe felt his breath hitch as a bolt of fear struck. What if their numbers didn't hold up? What if he miscalculated? With every calculation, he relied on the thorough research they had conducted together, knowing he had done his homework. But there was more at stake than analytics. He shared stories of Lila's family and their resilience, emphasizing their commitment to revitalizing the farm and not just relying on funding. It was this personal touch, mingling quantitative data with emotional appeal, that he had never before dared to employ. As he spoke, he realized he was no longer just pleading for mercy, he was advocating for a cause that truly mattered. After what felt like an eternity, Castillo leaned back in his chair, his expression unreadable. The silence hung in the air, charged with possibilities and threats alike. As Joe's heart thudded in his chest, anticipation twisted into raw, unfiltered reality. He was staring down the impending decision that could change everything. Finally, Castillo dropped his gaze to the papers before him, weighing the fragments of a newfound narrative against the constraints of financial prudence. "You make a compelling case, Joe," he said slowly, almost as if pulling the words from somewhere deep inside himself. "But this is risky. If we go forward, there is no room for failure." A fierce determination surged within Joe. "Then let us make sure we don't fail." The moment of truth lay just on the horizon, yet a chilling sense of uncertainty lingered. Would they secure the backing they so desperately needed? As they locked eyes, the stakes crystallized. This battle for the farm wasn't just a struggle against a faceless institution. It was a test of his newfound strength, a crucible for transformation. Then, out of the corner of his eye, he caught sight of a fleeting shadow passing outside the window. Joe turned, already forming a new, unsettling question in his mind. What was waiting for him beyond the confines of this negotiation? Joe felt the pulse of his heartbeat in his ears, drowning out the ambient noise of the bank. The shadow he glimpsed outside unsettled him, but he buried that anxiety beneath the pressing urgency of the conversation. Castillo sat opposite, peering at him through a veil of uncertainty, but Joe sensed a crack in the skepticism that could lead either to opportunity or disaster. "Mr. Castillo," Joe said, summoning every ounce of clarity. "I understand the risks, but we have an ethical responsibility here. This isn't just about numbers, it's about people's lives. The community depends on the farm, not just for survival but for their identity. We can redefine agricultural practices in ways that align profit with sustainability." It felt brazen, almost reckless, but this was his awakening. No longer would he shrink back under the weight of others' perceptions. In that moment, he owned the space between them, armed with conviction and a compelling vision. Castillo's brow furrowed. "It's easy to speak of ideals, Joe. You need to understand the harsh realities of banking. The bottom line is what drives decisions, no matter how compelling a story may be." The banker's words slapped Joe awake from the idealism that had carried him this far. The stark reminder of numbers and charts brought him to the cusp of desperation. But instead of retreating, he embraced the discomfort. "Then let us create a model that excites investors and holds integrity at its core. They need to see that funding this isn't just charity, it's a business opportunity ripe for exploitation of new agricultural technologies." As the conversation deepened, Joe felt like he was walking a tightrope. Every step was calculated and deliberate. Castillo's posture shifted slightly, and Joe caught him momentarily lost in thought, weighing the potential of his words against the limitations of tradition. With each passing moment, Joe's confidence grew, fostering a resolve he hadn't recognized within himself before. There was power in such exchanges, conversations that could sway the trajectory of lives. He realized that he was no longer, as he once thought, merely a pawn in a larger game. No, this was his chance to become an architect of change. But just as Joe gained momentum, his mind darted back to that fleeting shadow. Was it simply a trick of light or someone more sinister? Somewhere within him, a knot of insecurity tightened, a whisper of doubt that he had fought so hard to silence. Joe's focus returned to Castillo, who was flipping through the proposals with a degree of earnestness that was new. "What you're suggesting could work, but I need reassurance. Can you commit to regular updates, progress reports, and contingency plans? This isn't a game, this involves real stakes." Joe hesitated. The reality of the commitment loomed like a specter, each requirement amplifying the gravity of what lay ahead. "Absolutely," he replied, his voice firm. "I'll ensure that we keep transparency at every level. Trust will be our currency." Something flickered behind Castillo's eyes, a mixture of hope and skepticism. That's a start. As they delved into the nuances of structure and strategy, the minutes melted away, and Joe harnessed this energy, pouring it into their plans. Ideas flowed more freely now, like water from a spout long sealed. He found himself maneuvering through a world he previously felt barred from, each interaction building the framework for a new reality. However, amid the excitement, the shadow returned to his mind, unshakably persistent. It wasn't just a distraction, it felt like a warning. The unsettling sense of being watched churned within him, pulling at his concentration, revealing vulnerabilities he had yet to confront. Just as Joe settled into his groove, ready to outline the next phase of their collaboration, the door creaked open, and a figure entered, the unmistakable silhouette of someone he'd hoped not to encounter. "Joe, we need to talk." His heart sank. The woman who had just walked in was not just anyone, she was an embodiment of everything he had been trying to escape. The one from his past, familiar yet foreign, holding answers to questions he hadn't even dared to ask. What could she possibly want now? Joe's stomach twisted as he confronted the unexpected intrusion. The room felt smaller, stewing with the weight of the past he thought he could leave behind. Her presence was electric, a palpable tension sparking between them. "Can't I even get 5 minutes?" he muttered under his breath, unwilling to let the moment falter or betray him. Turning back to Castillo felt like a safety net, grounding him in the current task. "Mr. Castillo, let us keep this focused." But the woman Maya had other ideas. She stepped into the light, her shadow dripping with the familiar blend of regret and unresolved emotions. "This is a bad time, isn't it?" she said, her tone layered with sarcasm that belied an edge of sincerity. "What do you want, Maya?" His voice was steadier than he felt. He could almost feel Castillo's eyes darting between them, silently judging the way their past collided with the negotiations at hand. "I need to talk to you about the farm, Joe," she said, and just like that, the words carved through the tension like a knife, slicing into the heart of everything Joe had worked to build. He realized this wasn't merely a coincidence. She was back for a reason, one that rattled his personal foundation. He jabbed a finger toward Castillo's proposals. "I'm trying to secure funding for sustainable practices. This is serious. Why don't we take this outside?" Castillo interjected, casting a glance at Maya, the tension thickening like fog around them. Joe could see the banker was interested but also wary of the emotional undertow. "No," Joe replied firmly, a flicker of challenge igniting within him. "Whatever it is you need to say, it can be said here." The words flew out of his mouth, fueled by anger and defiance, but beneath them, something else simmered, a yearning for closure he struggled to articulate. Maya's eyes searched his, softening slightly as if sensing the shift in his demeanor. "I want to help. I've seen what's happening with the farm. I'm part of that community too." "Part of it?" Joe interrupted, steely and unforgiving. "You chose to walk away." The silence swelled between them, lapping at the walls like an unseen tide. Joe felt the sting of memories flood back, the long nights spent planning, the dreams that had woven their lives together, now frayed by time and distance. "I didn't have a choice, Joe," Maya insisted, her voice dropping an octave, desperation leaking through her bravado. "We all have to make sacrifices. But things are different now. The farm is in danger, and without outside support, it may not survive. I came because I thought maybe we could work together." The weight of her request hung heavy in the air, warring with the bitterness he had held on to for far too long. There was vulnerability in her plea, and in that moment, he felt the threads of responsibility tugging at him with fresh urgency. Yet the cautious entrepreneur in him wrestled with the emotional turmoil she had stirred. Every instinct screamed to dismiss her, yet beneath the rush of anger lay a flicker of recognition. Could there still be a chance for redemption, not just for the farm but for them as well? He had uncovered a deep sense of resolve during the meeting with Castillo, vowing to reshape his path. How could he lead others if he could not reconcile his own past? "Fine," he said finally, his voice steady despite the turmoil churning inside. "But this isn't about us. If we're going to do this, you have to put the community first. No personal agendas." Maya nodded, the fire in her eyes igniting anew a resilience that mirrored his own. "I wouldn't want it any other way." As they began to dissect possibilities, a new synergy formed, intertwining their strengths and pasts in an unpredictable dance. Joe could feel the shadow that had lingered around him start to recede, but it remained a constant reminder that the stakes were much higher than just their personal stakes. Just then, Castillo returned, glancing at the two of them as though deciphering a secret code. "So, what's the plan?" He slid his pen across the table, ready to chart the next phase of risk, but Joe felt something else eclipse the numbers, the pulse of recognition, the sense that rebuilding was a far more complex venture than simply securing funds. The weight of the impending decision pressed down on him. Joe had a choice to make, and it could rewrite everything, even the foundation of who he thought he'd become. Suddenly, the door opened again, and another figure stepped through, reshaping the dynamics in the room once more. I heard you were working on a new model for that farm. What other secrets had come back to haunt him? Joe turned toward the door, already bracing himself for yet another complication. The figure emerging was a man, tall and robust, wearing weathered jeans and a plaid shirt, the kind that hinted at long hours spent under the sun. He had a weather-beaten face that spoke of resilience and hardship, the direct product of a life spent grappling with nature. "Who are you?" Joe asked, impatience creeping into his voice. He could feel the tension thicken again, the air growing heavier with every beat of his heart. "I'm Andy, a friend of Maya S. I heard you two might be collaborating on the farm situation," he replied, his voice steady but tinged with uncertainty. "I'm involved with a co-op initiative that focuses on sustainable farming practices. We've had some success in neighboring counties, and I thought I could offer some insights." Maya's expression shifted, a mix of surprise and hope crossing her features. Joe's immediate thought was to dismiss this intrusion, but as he glimpsed Maya's eyes, filled with anticipation, he stalled. The thought of pushing everyone away again seeped through his mind. "Insights?" he repeated, his skepticism evident. "And what do you think you can bring to the table that we haven't already considered?" "Actual experience," Andy replied, standing taller, the firmness in his words catching Joe off guard. "I've been on the ground doing this, Joe. We've turned around failing farms. With the right approach, your plans can work and work better than you'd imagine." Joe hesitated. His mind swirled with thoughts, grappling between dismissing the unfamiliar man and recognizing a potential ally. He recalled the strain of managing the farm alone, the sleepless nights filled with worry about its fate. The last thing he needed was to invite chaos into an already tumultuous situation. But then again, what did he really want? To fail alone or to lean into the possibility of community? That question nagged at him, the notion of support clawing away at his hard-won independence. "Let us hear what you have," he finally conceded, the decision creeping onto him like a slow tide, bringing in both an opportunity and the burden of trust. "But understand, my priority is the plan, keeping it sustainable and focused on what the community needs." "Absolutely. That's why I'm here," Andy nodded, diving into the details. "We can introduce crop rotations that prevent soil depletion, work on composting instead of synthetic fertilizers, and most importantly, create a community-driven distribution model that connects directly to consumers." As he spoke, Joe's mind raced, absorbing the straightforward solutions that bubbled with potential. He could envision a blueprint, one that moves beyond mere survival and into a thriving enterprise. His thoughts tangling with Maya, he considered their shared past for a moment. Could this new direction help heal old wounds? What unsettled Joe was not just the prospect of collaboration, it was a misconstrued sense of his newfound purpose. Shouldn't the burden of the responsibility rest solely on his shoulders? Each resolution he made demanded sacrifice, yet it was becoming increasingly apparent that to cultivate change meant relinquishing control, a leap that terrified him. Maya interjected, "Andy's ideas could really work, Joe. We can't afford to be short-sighted right now. We need all hands on deck." He glanced between them, sensing the delicate web they were weaving, a connection not merely for the farm but one that palpitated with chance and history. "Fine," he said again, a hint of finality in his voice. "Let us do this, but we gather results fast. We have a deadline to meet." Their energy shifted, and as they began discussing logistics, Joe felt a cautious optimism unfurling within him. This was new territory, a crossroads of personal rebirth mingled with professional ambition. Yet the nagging worry still clawed at his edges. Would he be able to trust again? Minutes turned into an hour as they detailed strategies, the tension slowly evolving into excitement. But beneath it all lay the relentless question of vulnerability. Suddenly, the phone on the table buzzed violently, cutting through the moment. Joe grabbed it, frowned at the screen, and saw a name he hadn't expected: Sharon. It was not just another distraction, it was a confrontation he could no longer avoid. "Excuse me," he muttered, stepping outside, the sound of their ideas suddenly far away. Facing another ghost from his past, he braced himself for a different kind of reckoning. The moment had arrived for him to decide where his loyalties truly lay and who he wanted to be moving forward. What awaited him on the other side of the door was an uncharted territory rife with potential transformation. As he paced in front of the fading sunlight, he couldn't shake the feeling that the upcoming conversation couldn't just shape his own future, it could unravel the intricate ties he had just begun to navigate. Joe took a deep breath, grounding himself in the here and now as he stepped outside the bank, the fading sunlight casting long shadows across the pavement. Life hurled unexpected challenges, but now felt like a moment of reckoning, a convergence of his past and a future that shimmered with potential. "Sharon," he said cautiously, putting the phone to his ear and anticipating her words with a swirl of uncertainty. Her voice crackled through the line, lacing the air with both familiarity and a cold reminder of the intensity of their shared history. They had fought hard for their dreams, long before life's unpredictability had torn them apart. That day felt surreal. They had been kids dreaming of futures untainted by the burdens of expectation. Ironically, now it was a dire situation that brought them back together, a reckless attempt to reclaim what should have been a shared journey. "Joe, we need to talk about the farm," Sharon urged, urgency clinging to her tone like a storm brewing. Instinctively, his resolve was tested. Could he carry the weight of a partnership fraught with disappointment? Each moment they spent arguing over who was to blame for their relatively unfulfilled ambitions had created a fissure he had just started to heal with others. Yet she was asking for his help again. "I'm in the middle of something important," he replied, his voice firm, but underlying it was a curiosity to understand how far she'd fallen, balancing the fragility of their past with the determination he had cultivated. "Joe," she pressed, "I'm about to lose everything. But I can see you're on your way up. I know you'll be the one to save it if we work together." Ultimately, a flicker of compassion stirred within him. Though he had refused to let her voice into his heart before, some deeper understanding compelled him to recognize the vulnerability beneath her confident facade. Maybe this was his moment, a choice to transform not just his life, but hers too. The push and pull of their personal journeys danced between hope and superstition, but ultimately the language of growth beckoned. "Let us meet. I'll be at Lila's farm in an hour." "But know this, I'm not returning to the patterns of our past," Joe affirmed, feeling the climate of his conviction solidify with each decision he made. "This is about change, not nostalgia." "Understood," Sharon replied, a hint of relief breaking through the fervor. After hanging up, a cascade of emotions pulled at him, possibly because old ties never truly faded away. Perhaps they wandered, waiting for the right moments to resurface. He turned sharply, his heart racing. Inside the bank awaited a multitude of ideas, plans to save Lila's family farm, and the spark of innovation that had begun to emanate among this new cohort of believers in change. As he stepped back inside, Joe immediately felt the pulse of energy surrounding him. The atmosphere thickened with anticipation as his partners discussed their experimental plots. Maya and Andy's enthusiasm was infectious. Together, they represented a new kind of camaraderie. The unforeseen collaborations were beginning to morph into something meaningful, all intertwined with the urgency of their shared purpose. "Joe," Maya called, pulling his focus. "We need your insights. What are we doing next for momentum?" He settled into the chair beside them, the whirlwind of strategies emerging around the table resonating with the growth he had experienced. "We'll develop an outreach plan," he began, excitement radiating in his voice. "Using local resources and our innovation, we can open dialogue with the community, making them feel invested in the vision." Every decision he articulated carried the weight of his journey, the stumbles and successes, fear and empowerment coalescing into newfound clarity. Over the next hour, they forged concrete plans, articulating a vision that now included forging not only acceptance of innovation but the bridging of community ties, opening the farm to market opportunities while celebrating rich narratives. With each decision made, it felt like a symphony, setting forth a resonant melody that echoed change. Joe recognized the shift unfolding around him, not just a fight for survival, but a movement toward transformation, a reclamation of personal destiny. As light poured through the windows, the drying ink of the proposals mirrored the firm posture he claimed over his future. He was more than a caregiver of the farm, he was now an architect of a legacy built on resilience. At that moment, the door swung open again, letting in the crisp air and sending a shockwave through the room. Joe glanced over, heart pounding, as he regarded the face of a figure from his past stepping through the threshold, unexpected and untamed. "Joe," Sharon said, standing tall, palpable determination interlacing her voice with a sharp clarity. "I'm here to help. Let me be a part of this." The words swirled around him, each syllable drenched in historical tangents that hung tenuously between them. "This isn't just about our past," he reminded, "this is bigger now, about saving dreams." Joe observed her reaction as realization washed over, the protective facade shredded in the wake of truth. This new challenge meant adapting to growth, redeeming moments lost together, yet still investing in their collective futures. "Together, though, we face challenges brand new," he continued. "No more past mistakes driving us apart." The room glimmered with renewed energy as they shared a silent agreement, the understanding that their paths had intersected again for a reason. Here lay not just the possibility of rebuilding the farm, but crafting a transformative new destiny together. In that defining moment, Joe finally surrendered. He let go of the shadows that had always lingered and pulled from his experience to forge a future unfettered by old burdens. He stepped forward with purpose, ready to embrace a life defined not only by his family's legacy but by the aspirations to embrace possibility. Beneath that recognition, confidence solidified. He had transcended the remnants of guilt that held him captive so long. Joe was not just moving into leadership, he was establishing a legacy that would extend beyond farms, fusing community with resilience in every decision they made moving forward. Now, more than ever, this was the time to act. They were on the cusp of something grand, and Joe felt that within his bones. A fire ignited anew. This was his moment to shine, and as the days unfolded, blossoming like the crops they nurtured, the ripple effects of personal growth transformed not only the farm but also the lives of those around them, putting them on a trajectory toward empowered futures filled with hope. Subscribe immediately to the channel to not miss the next exclusive emotional stories. Leave a like now to feed the algorithm. Comment your reactions and theories about the ending. Share instantly this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this conclusion. You need to subscribe now. This is the moment to show your support. Don't wait even one more second to share. Only true fans of personal overcoming stories understand the importance of supporting the channel through these actions.